All right, so we're back with another video. We got the NFL draft coming up this week. We got our friend Jackson here, who is our high school teammate. He was a center for Jake. Jackson is coming to us from our homeland in Rochester. Jackson, why don't you say what up?
What's going on? Here from the motherland.
From the motherland. So this video, we're going to talk about our top QB prospects in the 2020 draft coming up on this Thursday. I think we all have a census number one, but we're going to go in depth on each of them, each of the top guys, and then we'll give projections on where we think they'll land, some possible trade-up scenarios. It's going to be a great video, so make sure you stay tuned for the whole thing.
Welcome back to Amateur Hour Sports. I'm Trent with my co-host Jake.
I think that is sort of his defining game as a QB.
I just have to say, never go all in on the Raiders ever.
So Jake, let's start off. Number one overall pick. I think we all know where this is heading, but who do you got number one overall?
Joe Burrow going to Cincinnati Bengals. It's pretty obvious at this point. I mean, Joe coming off such a great year, winning the Heisman. It just makes sense. He's an Ohio kid, going to go back to Ohio. So I just think that he's the right pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, who are probably going to be moving on from Andy Dalton after these stagnant seasons.
All right, so Jackson, I think you're probably in the same boat. What do you think with Joe Burrow going number one overall?
I think it's just a lock. You can't pass up a guy who could be your franchise QB like that. They won't mess this up.
It makes all too much sense. I mean, you got the Cincinnati kid. He's from like an hour and a half away from Cincinnati, like Heisman.
Yeah. And he's 23 years old.
Touchdowns.
He's more mature than all the other quarterbacks, if you think about it. He's 23. I mean, he's older than I think Lamar Jackson and Josh and a couple other guys who are already starting quarterbacks.
Let me raise this question to you guys. This is interesting. Maybe an interesting take on Burrow. I know you just mentioned Andy Dalton. Do you think it would be wise for them to keep Andy Dalton to mentor Burrow? And if so, is there a quarterback competition that they keep, or is it just hand it all over to Burrow?
So I'm going to go to my example of the Baltimore Ravens when they drafted Lamar Jackson. You have a guy like Joe Flacco there, and I didn't like the dynamic that happened between the two because it was like you're still hanging on to your ex instead of just ending it completely and starting something new, you know? So I think you got to just cut ties and just start your new thing, especially after a guy who's had success. So you want to cling to that success, but he's just not where he was at. So you got to cut the ties and start new. I don't know if you're different though, Jackson, but
Yeah, I think the Bengals are pretty committed to helping him find a new team to play on. He won't be in Cincinnati come start of the season.
Yeah. I think going to your point, Jake, is like difference between Flacco and Lamar Jackson was Lamar wasn't as – he was a little more raw than Burrow, you know, at the start. And I think, you know, having like a mentor sort of thing was good for him, whereas – I think Burrow can probably step in, be the starter, command the locker room just day one. Like,
yeah. I mean, he's already commanding a little bit. I mean, he told the front office not to trade AJ Green because he said, "I'm not going to play for you unless you you keep AJ Green and have that weapon for him." So I mean, he knows how to work with the front office and be command, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on from Joe Burrow, we got Tua Tagovailoa at probably most people's number twos, and Justin Herbert at 3. And then I think there's a pretty decent drop-off after that. So let's talk about those two guys, Tua and Justin Herbert. Jake, I know you have a stance on Tua, so why don't you just start it off? Because I'm sure you'll butt in anyway with it.
I'm not sold on Tua, number 5 to the Dolphins. I think Tua is a lot of red flags. He only started 1.5 years at or maybe 1 3/4 of a year at Alabama, right? And he had 2 ankle surgeries, and he had the dislocated hip, broken nose. I think he injured his jaw in that play as well, and a concussion. Like he is injury prone. I mean, that is, first off, that's a huge red flag. Second of all, the hip dislocation. I mean, we've already heard the legend about Bo Jackson, you know, coming back from that. I mean, his is so much different and so long ago, but like still that's such a your hip is just not supposed to dislocate like it is, and just coming back from that and the Dolphins not being able to examine him up close because of this, whole COVID thing. Those are huge red flags for me. I would never draft a quarterback who I knew was coming off an injury like that. Regardless if it's Tua, like his potential, it is too big of a red flag to take him instead of Herbert at that pick.
I think in general this year, because of the circumstances, it's a tough year for any player coming off of injury or player with injury concerns. Like, you're not going to get the physical in-person evaluations that you could get in years past. So it's a tough year to really prove that you are healthy and that your injury concerns shouldn't be as big of a concern, which is why, the value for Tua is all going to be based team to team. Some teams probably going to be more concerned with maybe say like a team like the Dolphins, who would be maybe more motivated to want to get Tua on the field, whereas somebody like the Chargers could take Tua and say, we have Tyrod Taylor for a year and a half till we feel comfortable with Tua again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
I think so. Obviously, it obviously depends on the team, like Jackson just said. But I think the disparity between Tua and Herbert, in my mind, is so much so that I would take Tua, even with the injury concerns, let him sit for a full year over Herbert, who is healthy, obviously. And I think, Herbert has flashed really, he has a lot of potential too. But I think Tua has done it. He's proven at the highest level, SEC football, won national championship. Like, I don't know. To me, like, he just has the it factor that I would want in my franchise guy, even if that means he has to sit a year, questions with his hip, sure. And I think those are legitimate. But I just, for me personally, I would be trading up if I were the Dolphins to take Tua.
That's interesting. In my opinion, like going back to what Jackson said, I really think the Dolphins are looking for a guy to come right in and play. And that's your Herbert guy.
Right.
And like Tyrod Taylor is
completely
capable of making the playoffs. I don't know. I think the Dolphins are looking for that guy right away to just come in and develop right away because they don't have any expectations. Like their team, they want to see a guy start to develop into that guy. But the Los Angeles Chargers, on the other hand, they've already committed kind of to Tyrod Taylor, and obviously as Bills fans, we all know, like he can win you games. He can bring you to the playoffs. So I don't think they are as concerned as as playing right away. You could let Tua rest in Los Angeles more than you could in Miami, in my opinion, just from what I think that they're planning to do with the two quarterbacks. And I got to bring up I know you guys don't really care about it, but I know like the Wonderlic score, Tua only got a 19 on, whereas Justin Herbert got a 39, which is the second highest of the quarterbacks in this draft. And that Tua was dead last. That concerns me. And, I was watching First Take this morning, and, they're kind of blowing it off like, oh, I see Tua on the field. Like, obviously he's got that football IQ. Yeah, obviously he does have the football IQ. But that is just that whole Wonderlic thing is just it's your entry level. Like, how are you going to learn? How are you going to adjust to the NFL style? That's really what the Wonderlic is supposed to show, like your maturity level. How are you going to be like when you're a professional? And that is concerning because, he is like 6 points below the average, which is 25. And that's just not a good sign, especially with all the red flags that I've already said before. It puts more question. I don't think being questionable is not good for Tua, his draft stock. I'm not saying he can't play. Like, I think he probably will do fine. I'm just saying in the sense of the draft, I cannot see him going 5th to the Dolphins. Like, I can see him 6th or later than that.
So you wouldn't trade up for him?
No. I think he's going to fall of anything.
Yeah, so like the big thing with Herbert is, last year there was a lot of talk with him as being the number one quarterback if he came out. And then obviously he stayed for another year at Oregon. I think, some of the reasons why we're talking about him as the second or the third quarterback taken, and in a lot of cases maybe the third, depending on what teams value Tua's health. You have to look at the depths of the quarterback classes the past years. If you think about last year, it was one of the weaker, quarterback classes in terms of, pre-draft hype. In terms of, there really wasn't a prospect. There wasn't a quarterback like a Joe Burrow in there. Kyler Murray has his questions. I think Joe Burrow is more of a solid quarterback to take at number one overall. So I think with a weaker class that Herbert's kind of jumped to the front of that, whereas now there's a much deeper class. And we're talking about, perennial superstar in Tua and a guy who locked up the number 1 overall pick in Joe Burrow, where you see him fall back a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my stance on Herbert, you look at his numbers. He had this past season, he had 32 touchdowns, 6 picks, 67 completion percentage, and 3,400 yards, which, I mean, college-wise, you have to take with a grain of salt, especially in Pac-12. But, touchdown to interception ratio, that's awesome. 67 completion percentage, I would, that's pretty solid. And I think a lot of people, he has sort of that almost not necessarily Josh Allen type, ridicule. He's a little more accurate, but huge guy. He's a huge frame, has a nice big arm, and he showed improvement in his accuracy this year, which I think was his big thing coming out, this year versus last year, something he wanted to improve. So, I mean, as a prospect, I like him. And I think if, Tua wasn't in the conversation, I think he would be easily second best quarterback.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see your point, with injury concerns, maybe he is the second best quarterback. Let's move on to the next tier of guys, though. Most notably, Jordan Love, who, speaking of Josh Allen, comes from small school, has a huge arm, a lot of accuracy concerns. So you take a look at Jordan Love. Last year, he threw 20 touchdowns, 17 picks, which is really alarming. And the season before, his sophomore year, he threw 32 touchdowns and 6 picks. So my biggest concern with him, and his completion percentage went down. My biggest concern with him is what happened from, sophomore year to junior year, where he's throwing 11 more picks and 12 less touchdowns, and his completion percentage dropped, 2 points. So it's that to me is a huge red flag. And those aren't even Josh Allen numbers. Josh Allen had better numbers than that. Little concerning if I'm missing out on those top 3 guys at quarterback.
So the big thing with Jordan Love is he's not in that. We think those first 3 quarterbacks are got to be gone in the first 7 picks, right? Maybe let's say top 10, they're all gone. Well, the weird thing about Jordan Love is he's in that weird mid to late first round, it seems sometimes. And, will he fall out of the first round? Will, he start falling and see a team jump? I think he's one of the polarizing players on the draft boards, where there are going to be teams that need quarterback that think that this is not our guy and we don't want him by any means. And then there are going to be teams that, may see that it's worth, pick 17 on this guy, maybe a late teens pick, an early 20s pick. That's what's interesting about him, is how polarizing he is. I think he's going to need to develop a little bit, but he's still going to be there, and the teams really see high futures for him.
Yeah, I mean, when you go into that, you have a big year in college, especially at a smaller school like in the Mountain West, like Utah State is. He had a pretty good year that you said 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, right? And then he went 20 and 17. You can definitely see he tried to force a lot more balls, kind of maybe worrying about where he might fare in the draft, off his, potential from the year before. So he kind of wanted to put up big numbers again. But so that doesn't truly concern me. 17 picks obviously is a lot, but you can kind of contribute that to him forcing the ball a little too much, which is something that I think when you go into the NFL, you come out and you play a little more conservatively as a rookie. You might throw picks just because you're still getting used to things, but I don't think you force a lot of balls like you would in a college sense. And also I've seen the Colts, as a potential landing spot. So it's kind of interesting to see that there might be some quarterback competitions coming up with him, because he seems like a guy who would get on the roster, maybe sit half the season, sit full season, learn behind somebody, and then get the okay, which would make the Colts kind of like a nice spot, get behind Phillip Rivers.
With Love and the next couple guys we'll talk about, moving away from those top tier guys, these guys get drafted in the later to the first round, early second round, whatever. But that means that there are better teams drafting then who already have quarterbacks. Like you said with the Colts, I think they'd be a great fit. But for the guys we'll talk about in a little bit, you can see the Saints, the Packers, I don't know, the Bucks now, who knows, with Brady. But, with older quarterbacks who need to, start to groom the next Aaron Rodgers, the next Drew Brees, these guys will probably get taken maybe end of the first, a lot of them, in hopes of, grooming them to be, the next stars of the league. Our next guy is Jalen Hurts. I think is one that probably a lot of people have in mind. Just coming from Oklahoma, a big program. He had a great season statistically and led them to the college football playoff. And he was an Alabama guy. He did great in Alabama, and then Tua came and just kicked him aside, I guess. And he transferred to Oklahoma again, had a great year. Do you guys like? I guess with the next tier guys, let's pick out of Hurts, Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason. Where do you guys rank those three among each other? And anyone specifically stick out to you guys?
I think I have Eason at the top of that group. I think if people think about, last year kind of a down year for Eason, but really his whole career at Washington's kind of been, this guy is the next coming of, this athletic pocket passer type of quarterback that we see nowadays. And I think that teams are really going to value that. I think especially if you think about, you mentioned the Packers maybe looking for their next guy. If you think about an athletic pocket passer, you think of Aaron Rodgers, a guy he has the athletic ability to run and scramble, make plays out of the pocket, but he's really focused on, making throws from inside the pocket. I think that's a team that could really put a lot of value on a quarterback like Jake Eason.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Eason transferred from Georgia, who Jake Fromm beat him out. I know Jake Fromm's big knock right now is his arm strength, and I mean, I guess he did beat out Eason, but you take a look at Eason's measurables. He's 6'6", 227 pounds. Like that's a big boy, and he can toss the rock. And I mean, Dino, do you have any thoughts on like Jake Fromm, the guy he lost to in Georgia?
Yeah, I was gonna say my point before you talk was that I think Fromm just came in a system that fit him better. It was more of a shotgun based system that they started going to. But I think Fromm he's the more prototypical guy. If we still look at that stat because everyone's so different now. But I think Fromm's big knock is he's not that tall, he's not that athletic, so he's not like a Tua who can move and maneuver the pocket, and he's not like a Russell Wilson who's got that strong arm and he's accurate. So he's kind of like caught in the middle. I don't really see him getting drafted until late rounds, but I can see Jalen Hurts. I could see them picking the Saints picking him up actually. I think that would be a great fit for him. Stand behind Drew Brees and Taysom Hill. And I think that if he can learn behind those two, especially he could do Taysom Hill's job in the backfield just as well as Taysom Hill could do, and you won't have to pay him like as much. I think it could work. I really think Sean Payton could make room for Jalen Hurts and put him up. But as opposed to Jake Fromm, I just think he's kind of he doesn't do everything. He does everything well. He doesn't do like one thing particularly great. So he's kind of just like a average guy who might go to the right place, but I don't think he'll get drafted.
I feel like Jake Fromm for me, and like this is just coming out of college wise, he kind of reminds me of Tom Brady, where it's like just coming out of college, not like anything else, but like doesn't have the measurables, average height, 6'2", whatever. I guess Brady's taller, but like not going to wow you with his arm, but maybe could make, he did win games at Georgia. He had, he was efficient. It's not like he wasn't, putting up decent numbers, but yeah, I mean, he's not really like, no one's really talking about him, like, whereas Eason and Hurts, I think Hurts especially has, he's a laundry list of accolades and stats that you could go behind. And I do think Eason from a developmental like QB standpoint, Eason is far better than Fromm, standing at 6'6" and just his bigger arm. But I don't know. I think Fromm could be a sneaky like 4th, 5th round pick that some teams just pick up, and he's maybe just an average starter. I don't really know if he's elite. I don't really see him being elite down the line, but like your average prototypical couple starts here and there guy. Sounds like a backup to me. Sounds like a perennial backup. But
the next Matt Moore.
Yeah.
Hey man, make your money that way. Yeah, I agree I loved your point though that you brought up. Like you saw 2 years ago the Packers without Aaron Rodgers and how they had that losing season. Mike McCarthy gets fired, and it brought up the question like, when do we start grooming somebody else? Like when when do we have to suck up our starting quarterback who's been there for a while, had success? When do we have to suck up him having hurt feelings and by drafting like a guy in the first round, somebody who is just going to do the Aaron Rodgers to Brett Favre. Just that's the perfect example. Just some guy who's going to come in the first rounder and he's just going to sit behind him for a little bit, not play right away, groom him, and then get rid of your old quarterback. I think that's going to start being a trend for sure because all these guys are getting up there in age.
When you look back 2 years ago to the 2018 draft, Mason Rudolph was drafted with, I believe, their second round pick, maybe even first round. I don't know.
Yeah, second or
but
third
anyway,
round.
I remember they used a high priority draft pick on him, and Big Ben was pissed because he was like, "It's like, dude, that pick could have went to someone else who made more of an impact, winning now." But if you're a franchise, you do, like we talked about earlier, you have to plan for the future, and it's like Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers, they're great still, but they don't have 5 years left. Maybe they do. I don't know. But they don't have that much longer left. Where you may have to spend. This may be the year that you have to spend a high draft pick to get these guys. All right, so that's going to do it for our QB video. Stay tuned for the draft this Thursday. Can't believe it's already here. We want to thank Jackson for coming on the show. 2 episodes. Make sure you check the other one out about the Giants draft. But thanks again, Jackson, and we'll see you guys in the next video.